Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new Redefining Security podcast. Have you ever thought that we are selling cybersecurity insincerely, buying it indiscriminately, and deploying it ineffectively? Perhaps we are. So let's look at how we can organize a successful InfoSec program that integrates people, process, technology, and culture to drive growth and protect business value. Knowledge is power, now more than ever. HITRUST is a leading data protection standards development and certification organization that strives to safeguard sensitive information and manage information risk for global organizations across all industries and throughout the third-party supply chain. Learn more at HITRUSTalliance.net. Archer empowers organizations to manage multiple dimensions of risk on one platform with on-premises and software-as-a-service offerings, and quickly implement industry-standard processes and best practices for advanced risk management maturity, informed decision-making, and enhanced business performance. Learn more at archerirm.com.
Here we go. This is Sean Martin, and you're very welcome to a new Redefining Security podcast here on ITSP Magazine. We have a great topic, one that's near and dear to my heart. I can't nerd out on this topic enough. And I think there are so many ways to approach this problem and to deal with it. But it's always good to hear different perspectives, and especially when you're presented with an opportunity to see how other teams may have done something well. And it seems we have that case here. We're talking third-party risk management, vendor management. It goes by many names. And we have two great guests with us today. We have Ebony Riley and Jesse Fosolo. And they're from St. Joseph's here, just around the corner from me in New Jersey. And we're going to hear about their program, how they work together, how they bring the rest of their third-party risk management program to support business objectives, I presume. And before we do that, though, I want to hear about them and their roles in their org and other things they do that helps drive this conversation. So, Ebony, first to you. What are you up to?
Well, I am Ebony Riley, as you said. Thank you so very much for the introduction. I am a Pattersonian myself, so while I do work as associate counsel for the hospital, I was born and raised in the great city of Paterson, New Jersey. So I happen to work for an institution that is in my city, and I take pride in that. As I said in my role, I am associate counsel, so I am one of two attorneys for the entire system. And part of what we do on a day-to-day basis and evaluating contracts is doing what I do with Jesse and evaluating the risk associated with anything associated with software. So as the individual that reviews each and every third-party arrangement for the system, what I do with Jesse is quite important. So we work very closely together.
Yeah, resiliency is key, I'm sure, which I presume we'll touch on. Jesse.
Thanks, Sean. Same thing Ebony had mentioned. Thank you for having us. And as well as to her story, I am also someone that was born in Paterson, New Jersey, and raised for my childhood in Paterson, New Jersey, and found myself back working for a healthcare system in the same city that I had lived in when I was a child. So, partly, putting myself into an organization that I have roots, historical roots, and is very important. But on the security side, as well as what we do here, I'm overseeing all of technology infrastructure and cybersecurity for the healthcare system. And my role is obviously understanding and controlling the risk and security, information security for the system, but also working and aligning myself and all of our processes with risk compliance, legal, and IT to ensure that third parties, not just security and software, but also regulations are met, standards are achieved, and risk levels are as low as they can be.
Yeah, I love it. And I often say that the CISO role is one that I don't know that I could do. And certainly not legal. That's way over my head, which is why I'm thrilled to have both of you on to bring your combined story together. I think it would be worthwhile, if you don't mind, a quick picture of the system. And I don't know how much you can share in terms of hospitals and labs and kind of how things work to that in the context of third-party vendors and where you need to pull in folks to kind of shore up systems and processes.
So the hospital itself, we're a system of 2 acute care facilities, 1 rehab center, and about 35 to 40 offsite locations that we have to service and maintain. We have approximately 2,000 plus nurses, 1,000 providers, and about 5,600 employees that we maintain. As far as vendors and contracts, I'm going to leave that to Ebony to produce a number there, but we do deal with a large majority of contracts and agreements and third parties, as well as consultants and contractors and software as a service. And there's a multitude of engagements that we have. In fact, our Millennium medical record system is hosted, and we have a huge agreement with them, and we have to ensure that that vendor is meeting our security expectations is just one example. But if you can think of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications, software, and connections between our organization and other organizations, that's all maintained, whether it be through contract or just general security and posture and ensuring that they meet our standards. So that's the overall high-level 20,000-foot view of St. Joseph's and kind of all the interactions that we have. But it's a huge system. It's not just a single practice office. It's an enterprise system.
Love it. Anything to add there, Ebony?
Actually, yes. What I was trying to do was an idea of the breadth of third-party agreements that we deal with that really do have an impact in the nature that Jesse was just discussing. And while my computer will not operate with me right now, I can tell you I did have to do this about a week and a half ago. And I would say we have, if I were to talk about active third-party arrangements where there is some need for data, software, or a connection, it would be well in excess of 500 active agreements. If I were to give you a true number, it probably would be closer to 1,000, and these are active. So you can imagine it is, quite extensive, what we do here. Yeah.
Where to begin here? Because just that number alone. So Jesse, in the lead up to this, I think I read that you joined in 2014, and you took this on as an initiative that was near and dear to your heart, and you changed it up. So what was the driver to say this was something that needed addressing, and how did you start that process?
Well, I think it's an iterative process, just to be honest here. It's not something that was instantly achieved in 2014. I think Ebony can agree that every day, every year, it's always iterative and changes to the process and additions. And through our assessments that we do through third party as well as our own, we find things that can be improved. So to start in 2014, when I arrived, there was pretty much no information security department. There was a HIPAA privacy officer and a HIPAA security individual that would just ensure that we were abiding by HIPAA, but not documenting things, not really approaching it appropriately. And from that point forward, there was assessments done that looked at our policies that were lacking significantly I couldn't even explain it, but there was policies that were lacking in the institution that safeguarded our general security over data and software use and third parties. So from 2014 on, we've kind of deployed and implemented policies and procedures and started there. I think it wasn't until we started doing self-assessments and third-party assessments of our own security program where that started turning into those iterative changes, where they found gaps or issues with our program, and then we went back each year taking their guidance and making those changes to our system. Part of that process is ensuring that not just information security is, looking at the vendor and making sure they're okay, but actually doing deeper assessments, ensuring that they're compliant, ensuring that they're following a standard. St. Joseph's itself, we follow NIST cybersecurity framework, and we also ensure that our third-party vendors are SOC compliant if they're hosting any data for us, and we make sure that they have business associate agreements. So I think from 2014 till now, I can say now that we have a very good solid process, and hopefully we get through that and explain that, where we review these organizations before they execute contract agreements with St. Joseph's, and we know the security, we know the risks ahead of us. Back in 2014, 15, 16, we were identifying risk when it was already too late. And a lot of organizations, institutions are still doing that. And you see these third parties are being breached or targeted, and by then it's too late. You've either don't have enough protection, you don't have a business associate agreement, you're not meeting your standards as far as HIPAA, and you get in trouble. So we identified that early on and really focused on that. About 16 to 17, maybe 18, we really worked on partnership across interdisciplinaries, ensuring that all the parties were at the table when we did a risk assessments or had an audit performed. And at that point, everyone's aware of what's going on. It's not a secret. Information security is not hidden away, making their fair assessment of these vendors. It's everyone's involved. And from there on forward, now we're looking at systems and software to automate the process that now is, what once was manual, trying to automate it. So other people in the institution, as soon as they trigger, I want to acquire something or I want to talk to this vendor, that all the processes and procedures are done on the security and legal side.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, I'm just thinking of the maturity. So you mentioned assessments, and early on, I'm just wondering, were those true assessments, or were they through the lens of compliance? So more like an audit. And I'm wondering if you've transitioned into, I hate to use the word mature to suggest maybe you weren't mature, but transition from an audit to an actual risk assessment. Because I've spoken to some folks where when they're looking at third-party vendors and specifically at the BAA, it's around being compliant, and everything in security is being compliant first, and then we're actually worried about the security posture as well. So was there a transition from audit to risk assessment, and if so, how did that change?
I'll take that. So as an institution, obviously we need to make sure we're compliant, right? So there was certainly the minimums to ensure that we were compliant in 14, 15, 16. I think audit was there. I think compliance was there. I think the idea of information security being very important as far as a metric to ensure that risk levels are lower before executing things, I think came afterwards. And that's also increasing, right? As information security risk is increasing outside of the healthcare system, in the trends in the market, we have to have even more increased focus on it. And I think that helped transition us from a lower COBIT model maturity to a much higher COBIT model maturity, just because of the focus of risk.
I have to say, I agree with that, and to piggyback a little bit off of that, you do have situations that catapult you into having to address issues within your system. And we had one or two of them. They all predated both Jesse and I joining the system, but I at least had the luxury of joining the system after, unfortunately, a situation occurred. And it was a situation where, no one thought of getting an assessment done before some extensive software was purchased to make sure a device would work on our network. And little did we know that the device the software did not interface with our network at all. And now you've signed this agreement to purchase this equipment and purchase the software, and it doesn't interface at all with what, your system is accustomed to. So I joined St. Joseph's with that having already had occurred. So my scope now, in review, once I review these agreements, are what are the components? Has there been a security assessment done even before it gets to me? And if it has not been done, it is a hard stop in the system where it is supposed to be done before it gets to me. But if not, and I realize that there is some data or software component, even if I don't understand the nature of it, the minute I see software data, I immediately route to Jesse and his team before I even proceed. That way, in the event something does not interface with our system, or there are significant security concerns, they are addressed well in advance of us binding ourselves to an obligation. And I think that's where that transition from audit to risk assessment occurred. And I have to echo the sentiments that Jesse iterated when he first began, which is this is an ongoing process. We cannot, just say this is what our process is and this is how we handle it, because the threats are ever changing. The focus of the threats are ever changing, and we have to be able to, to match those changing times.
And I'm wondering, 500 is no small number to deal with. And if at some point you have up to 1,000, that's overwhelming, even just from a number perspective. I'm not even doing the work. How I know early on, BAAs were kind of the driver to at least set some level of expectation of we expect you to do this. And then over time, we've extended that to we expect you to do that by proving you have X, Y, and Z, or HITRUST or a SOC or whatever it may be. And that's done once a year, once every 2 years, as they're onboarded, as they're renewed, whatever it is. But as we know, risk is a living, breathing thing. So I'm assuming you're working toward a living, breathing model. How have you taken that journey thus far? Where do you sit on that journey in terms of progress?
I could jump in there as far as the assessment components. So as we go through, like you mentioned, we go through contract agreements, and not to step back too far, but during the contract component or even capital request, information technology actually has to assess those contracts to make sure that they agree to those from an IT perspective, to safeguard what Ebony had mentioned before, and in addition to security reviewing it. But from there, and this is kind of new and recent based on what the events are, organizations that are third party that do pass the assessment, and they are on schedule to be reassessed or monitored continuously, because we have software that does that for some of our larger partners based on data, based on risk. So we have an active, ongoing, all the time monitor of their institution and their posture. In addition, we have institutions, and I'm not going to name them, but healthcare has partners that have been breached or have had issues in the past couple of years. Those institutions or organizations are reassessed at the point of target. So when they are breached, they are assessed, and then they respond to us with what happened, and we document those incidents and document it down, and then we reassess them 6 to 12 months later to ensure that everything is corrected, and then that risk assessment is then shared with executives in our institution. That will qualify if that organization is worthwhile staying with, or that we have to move on, or if they breached contract, and that's when legal comes into play. But that ongoing assessment or reassessment is something organizations need to do, because, again, you don't know what you don't know. To your point, you sign a BAA, you hope that the organization that you're dealing with is doing their job. And that's why software systems that are out there that now allow you to monitor and do tracking of these organizations, for example, our EHR vendor, I get alerts on their posture if they decrease by any percentage or increase. And then I can see what's going on in their institution. And I track that as a metric, annual, and I make sure that they're meeting their performance levels. And that's what organizations need to do. Now, 500 is a big number. And it's pretty funny that, that's shocking, but what's more shocking is institutions that don't know that they really have 500 organizations that partner with them that have access to software or data, or have integrations or direct connections, or have contractors on site that have eyes on PHI or PII. So that number is not, inflated for us, because we're more aware, because we've been through this process. And Ebony's shaking her head, yes. And it's a very long and lengthy process to identify what you truly have in your system and what you are really connected to. But yeah, back to really assessing and then reassessing and holding them accountable, putting HITRUST into your BAA as required a couple of years ago, and enforcing, right? If you find something that is higher risk, asking them or forcing them to fix it before you agree to contract signage.
Yeah, it's a huge lever. And Ebony, I'd like your thoughts on this, because it's good as a lever, but only if everybody knows what they're agreeing to and uphold it over time. So the question I'm leading to is kind of the agreement language. And this is where it's always interesting, because I see so many parallels between legal and security, information security from a risk perspective, but language is still very different, right? Legalese is different from CISOese. So how do you work together to kind of translate, this is what the business is trying to generate in terms of growth and revenue and whatnot. This is how I'm doing my job to protect that growth. And I'm going to work with Jesse and his team to help identify weaknesses that would prevent me from achieving that growth. How do you get, sounds great as I said it, but how do you get that language to a point where you understand it, the vendors understand it, Jesse gets it, the executive leadership team get it, and you're all on the same page?
It's twofold, at least in my position. One, at St. Joseph's, we have standardized the process to a point where a document cannot get to me if it is software or data related, where IT is not involved. And if IT is in Jesse and security, or whatnot, and if I find that there are some concerns and I can't really tell, I am the hard stop. And I will say, hey, I'm not sure. Have you seen this? Have you not seen this? And for the most part, we've done I would say a much better job with making sure they are part of the negotiation process and the review process before the documents get drafted, so that by the time they come to me, the security requirements, the requirements that we're looking for with regard to data have already been fleshed out. I take it a bit further. So we do have that. We also do have what we promulgate as our internal requested and desired standard contract terms that handle everything from what your desired contract terms are to what your desired IT security terms are. So we give this to our directors and our managers who are responsible for negotiating agreements, as they are negotiating agreements, so they know what we are looking for before we even enter into contracts and receive the agreements to review. So having that ahead of time in the negotiation stage, I believe helps. Then having IT part of the process before it even gets to us for review helps. But the last leg of it all, and the last catch-all, I would say, is when in doubt, I always ask. And I will flip documents that I am actively reviewing to Jesse and his team and say, hey, can we work together on coming up with language that we feel will protect us a bit more, versus what we have here. And his team will actively work with me to develop the language. Because I don't have the subject matter expertise like his team does, I have to rely, on his team in that respect. And I'm not afraid to ask, and they are not afraid to offer it. They are not afraid to tell me this will not work. And these are the reasons why. This needs to be stricken. This is not industry standard. They will tell me. And I make sure I keep the lines of communication open. That is the only way I can accomplish it.
And Jesse, I often, I recorded a podcast earlier looking at standards and frameworks, funny enough. And the conversation is around the security team kind of forcing standards on, this is how you will do something. And I kind of feel that that legal has that same kind of leverage, that position to say, I'm not going to let you hurt yourself here. But there's another way to look at that. And I wonder if this is in how you look at things. Line of business owner says, we need to stand up this new marketing thing, or we need to stand up this new customer portal. We're going to use this partner to make that happen. Do you have a chance to get involved in those conversations before the software is clearly purchased, but it's easy to spin up a cloud service, right? As a trial without any contracts hitting your desk yet, Ebony. So are you involved in any of those strategy, planning, budgeting discussions where you can kind of say, we want to help you achieve the objective. Let us help find the right path for the software that you want to use, so that then we can have even a better standing when we go to negotiation time. Yeah,
absolutely. I think in the agreement process that Ebony was mentioning, where the managers or directors have engagement, have a direct connection, say what you were mentioning, some kind of SaaS software that they want to try or use, they typically do bring in IT. For one, they want support. They want it to make sure their software is going to work. We do protect our environment to the point where we don't allow softwares to be installed unless it's actually allowed. So we have a true list of what's installed, what's not installed, what can be accessed, what cannot be accessed. So one, I think over the past couple of years, they've realized that they can't just spin up something. Secondary, if they want support and ongoing support, we usually identify someone in IT, whether it be financial or clinical or ancillary, ambulatory, or technology infrastructure that supports that specific, or that would in the future support it. They're brought to the table, and during that agreement or conversation, before even pricing is thrown out, there's a technical call that information security and other IT members are on, and we're going through just how the software or solution is going to be deployed in our environment. And that's where initial vetting happens, right? How do you connect to us? How is it secure? What are your procedures on breach? What are your procedures on incidents? What's the SLAs? We discuss that there. Expectations from those conversations are then baked into the contract. And then review happens. If those are not in there, that's when those levers can be used, right? We discussed this. You executed this based on our conversation. And we capture all that. And I think it's been working quite well for the IT and information security. I think institutionally as well, but I can say every now and then there is someone that comes into the institution with a different, I would say, foreign culture, where in previous institutions, hey, they just used your credit card and they just went wild, right? They added their own and it works, and you find out later. And again, you have to go through the same process. Let's go back through it. Let's go through an agreement. Let's make sure BAA is done. Make sure there's assessment done. And I think once you go through that enough times and you cover enough of the institution managers and leaders that know the process and that are familiar with the process, and again, communication is key here. Right, the more management and all multiple levels of management understand the process when they have to go buy something, acquire something. And one good thing to note here is we don't have a multitude of signage authority for signing in the institution. It's a one-stop shop. So if you want capital, or if you want it on your budget to pay for it, there's one person in the institution that can sign and allow you to buy that product. That's it. Right. So if you can't go through all the process and procedure before that, you will not be able to pay for it. Hence, you will not be able to buy that product. So I think there's multiple levels here that I just went through, but combining all them together, it's really how we get ahead of those.
So talk to me a bit about that's selecting new and onboarding. And then there's the ongoing, basically assessing the vendors every year. And I don't know, you mentioned HITRUST, and I don't know if you're using their system or not, but I know managing 500 vendors in spreadsheet distribution, responses, analysis, and on your end, might be too much. How are you doing that for 500? Are you leveraging technologies and automation in lieu of a questionnaire in an XLS?
So initially, back to 2014, 15, 16, it was a rough time where information security was sending out an Excel spreadsheet with questions and working over email and phone call to go through 400 questions. We've matured since then, and now we also partnered with a third-party organization and security specialist firm that does third-party assessments with us. So as we go through, we identify security contact, we traverse that, we let them know that our firm, our partner firm is going to connect with them, and it's all automated through a web interface. Everything can get uploaded, exports get sent to us. We get quarterly reviews and risk assessment that combine all previous assessments together to give us a metric that we monitor and maintain. So across all of our vendors that we've gone through the process, we have a dashboard that we can see our risk based on our third parties. And that's the only way. I think if an organization with 100 or 500, doesn't matter, if you're still using Excel spreadsheets and using a questionnaire over email, you really need to focus on upgrading that. I think that's the broken link. With a lot of third-party assessments or security assessments, the teams just don't have enough bandwidth to maintain ongoing operations and do the monumental task of third-party assessing. So that third-party partner that we use, I think, really helped us go from, doing a process to really maturing that process.
And I think a major part of the process is the buy-in from senior leadership and the communication. Because when it is time to perform this assessment, which is annual, it is not optional. It has to be done. And the only way we can have a fruitful assessment is if folks understand that you have to participate in the assessment. So they being the IT department starts very early with letting us know, okay, the assessment is coming. This is the time frame, that we're looking at. And these are, monitor your emails because we are going to start scheduling our interviews, or whatnot. When that comes out, I already know this has to be done. And it doesn't take a member of Jesse's team or Jesse himself or even Jesse's VP to say, hey, you didn't. I know as soon as I see it, it's the assessment. I have to make it a priority. And for years, I've known this. And it's ingrained, at least in my mind. And I feel like it's ingrained in the culture, at St. Joseph's. Folks really do take it seriously.
I want to quickly touch on that before we start to wrap with some tips and advice for folks. Because you both mentioned you're born, you grew up there, you work there, you have a connection to the community, you have a connection to the system. I suspect that brings an even greater level of passion and desire to do the right thing. Not that anybody else would jeopardize that anyway, but I guess my point is the culture of what really matters here is the patient care, right? So what I want to maybe touch on quickly is your view of the patient in all of this. How often does that cross your mind? Well, this isn't just a system might get popped and data might get lost. This is potentially something bigger. Ebony, you first, maybe thoughts. How often does it? How often and how does that come across?
It is in the forefront of my mind because I am, as a person that's from the community, who, for the most part, my entire family is still serviced, through, the community and the doctors that are associated with St. Joseph's. I know what our demographics, correlate to, what we have access to, what we don't have access to. And I feel that one of the greatest things about St. Joseph's is its ability to truly live its mission. Our mission is not just our mission. We live it and we breathe it, and it comes out in the lengths that we go through to do what we do. And it's no secret, we are a 501c3, entity that serves, as a safety net institution. So, our resources are way more limited than other institutions that are part of larger systems, but we still get the job done. And it's because of our mission, I believe. So the first thing I think about in my mind is no patient should have to deal with what some of these risks could entail. They're not even going to understand it. It's not their job to. They're here to get care and, to make it through and get home. You don't want to have a data issue amid all of that and having to try to address that. So anything that we can do to mitigate that is very important to me. And Jesse, I'm sure to Jesse, as well.
Absolutely. Just to add to Ebony's comments there, our mission is really within all of us, and it's cultural. You can see it across all of our employees and doctors and physicians and clinicians and senior leadership. But I think it's not just about risk of breach. It's really risk of patient safety. Patients are certainly at the forefront. Also reputational, right? We do support a large percentage of underserved in our community, and we want to make sure that they're safe and protected, and they want to trust us, and we do everything we can, and whether it be just contract or risk assessing or ensuring that our vendors, our partnerships are safe to connect with or acquire. But in the end, it's really to ensure that the patient coming to us in our community is safe, is protected, not just their data, but them. Because from an IT perspective and an IS perspective, if something goes wrong, it's not just a nominal value. It's not just data. It's actually people. So I came from finance and other industries into healthcare, and it took about 1.5 years before that clicked, where you don't look at the bottom line and a number, and you're acquiring a contract and you have to hold them to the agreement. It's really that you have to make sure that they're going to abide the service that's going to protect your customers.
Yeah, it's interesting that transition you just described there too. I think it's easy to get, especially if we have our own nerdiness, right? Either it's technical or legal. We think certain ways, and it can sometimes be difficult to break out of what we do on a daily basis with technology and with contracts, and remember that there is a patient there. So I'm thrilled to hear that you both have that view and drive that culture. I know you wanted to, Jesse, and the stuff we were working on in preparation for this, kind of share some tips for folks to help them perhaps make a change for the better in their own program. And I'd like to hear from Ebony as well for fellow associate counsel. So Jesse, you first. Anything of note that you want folks to take away as they wrap up listening to us today?
Absolutely. Obviously, what you just talked about, spreadsheets and questionnaires and managing that internally. There's just too much going on. There's too much out there to sometimes handle that unless you have a very large team. Maybe look at a third-party partnership with a company to do and facilitate those third-party assessments for you. Just because if you're going to lack on the ability to do them or focus on them or ensure that they're done to the best that they can be, you're risking the organization. So obviously partner with a good company on that. Obviously find standards that work. And you had mentioned earlier pushing standards down on everyone. Don't be information security as the end all be all, because it can't be. There has to be a give at certain areas. Healthcare is and especially us, we're susceptible, right? Healthcare has legacy software tied to legacy environments or hardware that's millions of dollars of money to replace. And you have to ensure safety and security around them. You have to really understand that sometimes the security standards don't apply to everything, and you have to manage around them. So the third tip I would say is partnership across these departments, right? Legal, information security is paramount, but also risk, compliance, and executive leadership. If you have executive leadership on board with risk, elevated risk or escalating risk or security concerns, whether it be threats or vulnerabilities, they will be on your side. whether it be capital funding, whether it be opportunities in the future, but making them abreast of what's going on in your realm, whether it be contracts, whether it be changes to the agreement or the process to ensure safety or security, or whether it just be someone in information technology ensuring that things are following, say, for example, NIST, or that you're doing self-assessments to ensure that you're always increasing your posture and increasing your relationships with these departments and getting them involved. Ebony mentioned this earlier, where when we do our own internal assessments and we bring in a third party to help us, we bring everyone involved. There's 60 people in a room, or past couple of years virtually, going through your assessment, right? Where are your bad points and where are your good points? And let's work on them as a group, as a team. And that really gets into the culture. So those are the big areas that I would focus on.
Fantastic. Thanks. Ebony?
And just to piggyback off that, the only thing that I would add is, Jesse mentioned, finding standards that work. I think what comes with that is standardizing the process. So those standards that you come up with that works for your organization can be applied across the board. The more one-offs you have, we do understand that there are instances where certain standards are not going to apply for whatever service is being provided. But for the most part, because we are the entity that is seeking, the help or the assistance or the service of the vendor, we are seeking that from several hundred other vendors. So the only way you really can keep a hold of that is if you really do standardize your process to meet your standards. So if you don't have the ability to have a third party that can at least assist you in actively reviewing, potential threats and actively evaluating risk, what you could do is just come up with your term sheet of what your minimum system requirements are, what you're looking for when you are going to have either access to data or data exchanged. And once you get that, in a format where you can get it out to your leaders, your directors, your managers, now you have something that they can always refer to and use as they are negotiating. And it makes it a bit easier for your team in implementing, because contract A and vendor A should technically be adhering to the same requirements as contract and vendor X and Z,
Up and down the chain. I love it. Well, thank you both for taking the time to kind of walk through your program and how, it's great to see the maturity and clearly you two work extremely well together. And I can just see how you come together to kind of rally the rest of the organization around doing the right thing around third-party risk management. And I love these kind of stories. So appreciate it.
I'm just so grateful to have someone to help me understand it. Because I will tell you, about 5 years ago, I really didn't. But now, there are things that, in working so closely with Jesse and the team, that, before I even get it to him, I'm like, hey, this is an issue. Hey, they're hosted across seas. We got to think about X, Y, and Z now, which I can only do because of the lines of communication that, Jesse and his team, have established, and just being communicative. They don't ignore, it really is a collaborative effort.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for taking the time today. For those listening, there'll be links to notes show notes, and it might include links. I don't know if Jesse and Ebony want to share anything that might help folks make some steps and make some headway in their own third-party program management, risk management program. But look in the notes. If they're there, they're great. And again, Ebony, Jesse, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stay well.
Archer empowers organizations to manage multiple dimensions of risk on one platform with on-premises and software-as-a-service offerings, and quickly implement industry-standard processes and best practices for advanced risk management maturity, informed decision-making, and enhanced business performance. Learn more at archerirm.com. HITRUST is a leading data protection standards development and certification organization that strives to safeguard sensitive information and manage information risk for global organizations across all industries and throughout the third-party supply chain. Learn more at HITRUSTalliance.net. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Redefining Security podcast. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.